Good evening, everyone. Welcome to my channel. Before I get started, I'd like to ask you if you enjoy my content, if you find my information useful, please take a moment to like and subscribe. Having said that, I'm going to get started with today's topic. And today's topic is how did how did my family find ourselves in this current situation with the chaos of someone in the family having a mental illness? How did we get here? And the short answer is I don't really know. It could be a combination of things. And that's what I believe, that it is a combination of different things. And those things could be childhood trauma, hereditary. It could be using marijuana, experimenting with marijuana at a young age. It could be perhaps sports injuries. It could be the food that we give our kids. It could be any one of these or a combination of those things. So having said that, I'm going to give you all a little bit of background information about myself. So I grew up one of 5 children. We were very poor. We were the product of teenage parents. My parents got married when my father was 18 and my mother was either 15 or 16, I'm not sure. I do know that my mother had 3 kids before she was 19, and then she had my younger 2 brothers. She had them, and so by the time she was 25, she had 5 kids. My father was an alcoholic, and so when he drank, they would fuss and fight a lot. They would break up and get back together. At first, I would miss my father when he would leave, and I would be glad when he would come back home. But after a certain point, even as a kid, I got tired of all the drama and craziness that was going on in our house. And it was some crazy stuff. I mean, literally, my father had pulled a gun on my mother at one point, and she grabbed it away from him. And then she ended up turning that on him. He survived it. And believe it or not, they actually got back together after that. And it was just something always going on with them. And so when they finally split up, I was glad. That was one less unstable person in our house. But my mother was still there, and she was a very unstable person. And the thing about my mother is you could not blame her erratic behavior on alcohol and drugs, because she didn't use alcohol or drugs. She just was a mean, evil person. And she had her favorites. Like, she didn't really abuse my sister, but she abused me, and she abused my brother, who is about 1.5 years older than me. My mother died 2 or 3 years ago. I forgot exactly when. But since that time, close relatives have come forward, and my older brother, he is blind in one eye. A close relative told him that he lost vision in that eye because of abuse placed on him from our mother. This is all alleged, but a close relative told that to my brother. More recently, I talked to a close relative on New Year's Day, and this close relative told me that at one point my brother had a broken leg, and my mother said that my brother had fallen out of the bed, but close family members suspected that she was the cause of his broken leg. I remember to this day, my mother was going to sew a button back on my dress. And I think I may have been playing around with the button and I lost it. And she told me, find the button or I was going to get a whooping, as they said back in the day. So I searched the house high and low, and I could not find that button. And I did get a severe beating over a lost button. At the time, I might have been like 7 years old, and I got beat over a button. So, having said all that, from a young age, I was looking forward to being a mother myself. And I said to myself, when I'm a mother, I'm going to be the total opposite of my mother. I love sports, and I still love sports to this day. As I've mentioned before, I am a tennis fanatic. I loved sports, and my mother did not drive for one reason, but also she just never let us really do any extracurricular activities. So when I got to be about 14, I asked her if I could try out for this softball team, and she said I could. Surprisingly enough, she said I could. So I tried out for this softball team, and I thought I did pretty good, but I didn't hear from the coach. And then one day I was at school, this young lady in my English class asked me if I was going to come to practice that day. And I said, practice? I don't think I made a team. And she said, you did make a team. You're on my team. We have practice today. And come to find out, and I got this from the coach when I did end up going to practice, she said she had called my house, and apparently my mother pretended to be me. And she said, okay, I'll be at practice, but she never told me that. So my mother was okay with me thinking that I didn't make the team. So that's the type of environment that we grew up in. So I always wanted to be a mother, and I knew that I was going to be the exact opposite of my mother. My kids were going to be in sports. I would, if they so desired, I would make sure they played musical instruments. I would make sure we went on vacations. I would make sure I exposed them to culture. And as a mother, I did do those things. Sometimes I probably went overboard, but I was a PTA mom. I coached my daughters in softball. I was a team mom when my sons played baseball, when they played football. I was team mom. I was very, very active with them. We always took them on vacations. Having said that, you know how they say that girls marry their fathers? Well, when I met my husband, I knew that he had a drinking problem. And at the time, I was like 30. And so maybe my biological clock was ticking. So I just ignored that, and I went ahead and I married him anyway. And his drinking did absolutely cause a lot of issues in our marriage. And I'll just put it out there. There was domestic violence in our marriage, and my husband did end up actually spending a few months in jail because he would, if he wasn't drinking and driving and wrecking cars, then he was just causing chaos in our house. And so finally, around 2008, by this time, I had attended a few Al-Anon meetings. I really felt financially strapped because I had in turn, by this point, I had 5 children. And so I didn't feel like I could just up and leave. And so I was just figuring out ways to deal with this situation that I helped cause by marrying someone who I knew had an alcohol issue. And so one thing I did learn some things, some tactics, some strategies that I should use, you know, when dealing with a spouse or someone in your household that has a drinking problem. And they were helpful. And then around 2008, my husband had wrecked a car, and he walked into our house. He had been out all night. He walked into the house. His leg was all banged up. He was crying, and I took my kid. They had ball games that day. I told them, get your uniforms on. Get your uniforms on, get your bat bags, let's go to the game. And we just pretty much stepped over him and walked out of the house and went to the game. Because that was one thing that I learned from going to Al-Anon, is that when people have alcohol, drug issues, they will deliberately try to, you know, argue with you and get you drawn into their drama, and you shouldn't take the bait. And that's exactly what I did. So anyway, long story short, by 2008, my husband did quit drinking cold turkey, but some damage had definitely been done. So maybe childhood trauma affected my son, and eventually maybe that played a part in him later on being diagnosed with a mental health issue. Also, when my son was a small child, he had eczema. And at one point, before he was 1 year old, the pediatrician had prescribed a steroidal cream. And, when you know better, you do better. Back then, when my son was really small, we didn't have access to the internet like we do today, and you can research different things. Maybe, if when you know better, you do better. And if I had to do over again, I probably would not have used that steroidal cream on a child under 1 year old. Also, there's hereditary. Nobody in my immediate family has a serious mental illness, but I don't know, maybe generations back, somebody could have had a serious mental illness. Back in those days, people, maybe they didn't even have a diagnosis. People would just whisper and say stuff like, oh, she's crazy. She's crazy, And so maybe somebody back a few generations before did have a mental illness. I don't know, maybe my mother had a mental illness, because I don't understand why somebody would beat on small children. But anyway, and then another thing today is there's so many chemicals in the foods that we feed our kids. If I had it to do over again, I don't think that I would, I know I wouldn't have been feeding my kids, breakfast cereals laced with all kinds of dyes and chemicals. I would have, if I knew then what I know now, I would have made more informed choices about what I feed or what I fed my kids. So anyway, I don't know exactly how we got into the situation that we find ourselves in today, but it could be a combination of things. And I'll just say that I definitely would have made different choices, because I wonder about those things. Like, what could I have done differently to avoid the situation? And one really important thing that I almost forgot, I don't know how I could have forgotten this, but my son was always a very sensitive kid. He cried a lot when he was really young. So I was actually really surprised when he was in elementary school and he said he wanted to play football. I definitely, if I had it to do over again, I would not have let him play football, because by the time he got to high school and he was playing high school football, he was known as a heavy hitter. Like people feared him. They didn't want to be tackled by him. And then later on, after the fact, when he and I have had discussions, he told me that he was most likely walking around with concussions, and he never said anything to anybody because he wanted to play. He didn't want to be sidelined. And so that's one thing that I definitely wonder about. I wonder about, like, concussions. How much of an impact does that have, or did that have, on his developing brain? So at any rate, I am done with that topic for today. I need to get home. It's getting dark out here. You all have a great rest of your evening and be blessed until next time. If you guys have any comments about what I've talked about, please, again, like and subscribe for my channel, and then also add comments. I'd be interested in what you all have to say about how you think, or what your theory is about how you all may have ended up in a similar situation with a loved one having a serious mental illness. I'm interested in to know, to get feedback from you all. But until then, stay blessed.